Hello. I know what you're thinking. I thought this bitch said she was gonna be cooking. I have a lot of hobbies, okay? And because I cook so much, I have to do my dishes now. So you're gonna be along for that. I want to talk about the fact that liberalism doesn't have fandom. This is something that Alice Poole has been bringing up, and I think she's fucking on the nose. Very sharp to notice. We do not have fanaticism, right? Because fanaticism is a defining feature, in my opinion, of radicalism. It's really difficult to be a fanatic for liberalism because liberalism is by definition not a very exciting thing. So, how do we inspire fandom, celebration, fun and interesting engagement without falling into fanaticism? I have a couple of theories for this, but it relates really heavily to the rhetorical structure that I think liberalism should be using or is most suited to be using. Let's compare it first with the MAGA's rhetorical structure. MAGA's rhetorical structure is paternalistic. They are simply deeply submissive people who do not want to think for themselves. They want to outsource thinking for themselves to the highest possible authority they can imagine. That being their Christ Daddy, President, General. Weird. Not my vibe. To each their own, I guess. But they've got this perfectly on message rhetoric from the top to the bottom, right? Because the bottom just slurps it up. And on the far left, I think there's a really similar structure. They don't have one single figure that delivers them their talking points and their ideology. They instead have a single mode. So they have this idea of what repression looks like and what justice looks like, and they have decided that it is the only definition of those things, and they just morally grandstand. So, that's their whole deal. They morally grandstand. They don't have a single high, patriarchal figure. They have a single ideal. They are idealists, right? And the reason why you can't just wander around morally grandstanding against people is because regardless of what is the most moral position in any given conundrum, right, there is often only a couple of possible paths to governing in a liberal society which limits the government, right? In the same way that, I grew up with Republican, conservative, evangelical, fundamentalist parents, okay? And they were of the opinion that they could paternalize me into being a person they wanted me to be. Womp womp, right? But this is kind of what the left is doing. They are kind of trying to do this, moral superiority thing, where it's the dictums of Mao will save you. The dictums of Mao are the only moral. It's what the fuck, man? Jesus Christ. Obviously, that's hyperbole, people. But, they just sound like my Bible-thumping parents to me. And it's okay, so, you have an idea of what's the most moral thing to do based on your belief system. But, we literally have a government that is designed to avoid any one group's fundamental idealism from being the governing dicta of the fucking entire country. It's the whole point. So, I'm getting frustrated, obviously, as we all are, because, specifically in my case, because I am really interested in trying to make liberalism, which is moderate and admittedly boring, a more appealing image, or to give it a more appealing image, in the eyes of people who don't necessarily have the wherewithal to read a bunch of shit, okay? My fellow countrymen are woefully unread. And you know what? That is their fundamental fucking right. You shouldn't have to read a book in order to be a citizen of this fucking country. And you know what? I'm really interested in the project of you shouldn't have to read a book to understand why liberalism is better than MAGA or the DSA or whatever fucking Marxist-Leninists, you know, whatever Hassan Pikerism that you want to call it, right? Also, quick disclaimer, obviously I believe in social safety net policies, okay? So, like, don't come in my comment section being like, you just don't have any principles, you just want poor people to die. Nice try, asshole. Not the conversation that we're being that's being had right now, okay? Get a fucking job. Ironic, considering I'm unemployed right now. Anyways, my point is that, like, liberals do a really bad job of explaining why liberalism is cool and based. Like, even I'm reading Francis Fukuyama, and like, he wrote this book, Liberalism and Its Discontents, and it's like the shortest, most direct, in-depth explanation of what liberalism is and why it functions and why the people who are arguing against it are wrong, and it's awesome. But even that is too much for most people. The voters do not read. This is why we have this problem. Americans do not read. You know, side note, Americans aren't like required to do big literacy tests. You know, like, you don't even have to really be able to read to use your phone. It predicts what you want. So if you can like kind of spell something, you can find it, and you can get the phone to read it to you, you know, or, you know, thing of all things, you could just voice chat, you know, an LLM and find out what you need to know. Like, reading isn't necessarily a very prevalent skill right now. And I would be remiss to discover that I'm correct, that most people are actually much more illiterate than we actually think they are, because we're not really checking, you know? So that in mind, we have to operate on the understanding that these people are just going to go with whatever's the simplest thing being presented to them. Whatever's the simplest thing being presented to them. It's very easy to understand Daddy knows best. It's very easy to understand I'm more moral than you. That's easy. No one wants to read the 2 fucking treatises on government. No one wants to read the fucking end of history. No one wants to read the fucking Declaration of Independence, okay? And so, like, what we need to start worrying about is, in terms of rhetoric, how do we push liberalism as an ideology in a way that's really simple to understand? That is a project that I'm interested in hearing from somebody smarter than me about. Like, I'm okay with rhetoric, like, it's kind of my zone, it's kind of my area, but gee fucking whiz, it seems like we're not working hard enough on this. And also, like, it needs to be cooler, to go back to Alice's point. It needs to be way fucking cooler. You know what's really cool? A society of people that all get to make their own meaning. You know what's really cool? A society of people that know how to get along. And you know what the fundamental basis of getting along is? Minding your own fucking business. Minding your own fucking business. You know what I would love to do is to live in a world where other people, like me, mind their own fucking business. Would be wonderful. It's the fundamental basis for getting along. Some people really need to be reminded of this. So, like, when we're being a bunch of libs and we're saying, oh, you know, we need a messaging strategy, we need lib Fox News. No, we don't. You couldn't make lib Fox News. Fox News works because they have a centralized authority figure. Okay? You know, it's like a fucking cult. We aren't a cult. We're a conglomeration of disparate groups and individuals who share some basic principles, like egalitarianism, and, you know, like civil rights, and, like, that the government shouldn't tell me what I can and can't fucking do within certain reason. And so, because of this, like, misconception that we might need some kind of Fox News entity, we fucking don't, I would like to suggest a couple of initiatives here. We should seriously be investing in hyper-local arts. The hyper-local arts, I think, might be the savior of liberalism. Every different community needs a slightly different message on liberalism, because liberalism is for every single one of those communities for a different reason. Like, liberalism is antithetical to identity politics because it's for every identity. So, when we're saying, like, oh, you know, we need slogans. Okay, yeah, well, we need a county slogan. We need a state slogan. We need a city slogan. We need, like, where I live, you couldn't do the same kind of messaging for liberalism that you would do in, say, I don't know, you know, New York City. Because they're very blue there. But they're not, you know, like, they're not necessarily well-versed in liberalism. Also, props to Zohran Mamdani for being an effective, media-visible mayor. Big props. Keep pushing that tension. We need that tension, okay? Keep these damn liberals on their toes, please. They really need to be held accountable for delivering real, perceptible, existing, tangible policies that actually change people's lives. God bless Zohran Mamdani. I'm a huge fan. Not every policy, but whatever. So yeah, I think we should be working on hyper-local propaganda initiatives. Like, every county party in this country should have a propagandist. So, fun news, I'm working to become the propagandist of my county party, and I will be reporting back to you on how that goes. That's probably going to have to involve me completely and fully doxing myself, so we'll see how that ends up. If you guys know any good lawyers on the matter, I'd probably start there before I go for the whole thing. You know, whatever. But, like, we can't just keep saying we need to fight back against the far left. We need to fight back against MAGA, right? We need to stand up for liberalism. We gotta start worrying about how come nobody knows what liberalism is. It's because it's boring. And Americans' attention spans are degrading, okay? If you can't explain it in 12 seconds, and it's not emotionally salient, you know, then nobody fucking cares. I can't believe you have watched this video this far. I'm doing my fucking dishes and yelling. Also, we are allies. If you can pay attention to this much, this long, well, you know, unless you're hate watching, in which case, like, but, like, people don't spend a lot of time worrying about what's a good thing to do and what's a bad thing to do in terms of governance, in terms of, you know, almost anything. And, like, even I don't spend very much time worrying about it. And, like, it's fucking, we gotta do better about starting with the level of time, attention, and understanding that we can actually get. Okay? Like, when you're helping someone who's a little slow with their homework, you don't berate them for not being able to get it the first time. You find a way to explain it to them that they can understand. That's what we need to do. We need to start finding ways that Americans can understand liberalism in their individual communities, the things that apply to their communities most directly, and we need to be messaging on our values behind that a lot, right? So, like, in let's say it's a fucking, you know, Detroit, right? Detroit might be a different message than my area because in Detroit there was a ton of like manufacturing plants that are now closed, right? And so, like, when you message to Detroit, you might want to be messaging about, like, supporting small business. You might be wanting to message about increasing housing. You might be wanting to message about revitalizing derelict housing, right? But the values behind that should be that we want regulations that make sense, and we want to make sure that they are that they allow for freedom and that they protect justice, right? And that we want people to make their own decisions about where and how they live, right? And that we want people to be equal and free, right? Probably we're gonna have to get away from this, like, words are violence thing. That might have to go away. I'm not convinced yet. I would love to, if someone knows a lot about this weird far left thing where it's like I understand that people can, like, take psychological damage or, you know, emotional damage from hearing words they don't like, but you know what? I think that actually might be a that person problem. Even if that person is really oppressed all the time. But it's also a cultural problem. You know, like, in that moment, that's a that person problem. But in the broader conversation, it's a cultural problem. And I really don't think that we're gonna fix people's, like, good treatment of each other by doing, like, language policing. I don't think anyone's ever successfully language policed anybody else. Like, people are gonna talk how they want to talk, unfortunately. And I don't think it necessarily constitutes real harm and real injustice. However, it does constitute being a bad fucking friend, and people who aren't willing to get along with others in ways that make sense to them, that sucks. You guys are anti-American in my opinion. You guys suck. But yeah, that's a question for another time, but it is a big rhetorical point that I'm really curious about, if anyone has any ideas on the matter, because maybe I'm fucking wrong, I don't know. I just really need everybody to start getting on this project of how can we communicate about liberalism in a way that is simple for people to understand, in a way that is quick and easy for the illiterate to grasp, and in a way that is directly emotionally salient to people in their context. I look forward to updating you on my progress throughout this project. I look forward to maybe this project actually going somewhere. God, that would be fucking incredible. But probably not. If we're being real. I'm at heart a cynic. Truly. So, I'm not gonna open this rice cooker on camera because I steamed fish in it and I haven't opened it in a couple days. So, with that I say adieu. Message me.